Prince William notices a homeless veteran. What he does next surprises everyone. It was one of those gray London mornings where the drizzle seemed to hang motionless in the air, soaking everything with quiet insistence. People walked quickly under umbrellas, heads down, scarves pulled tight. The city was awake and indifferent. Just outside a bustling train station near Westminster, hidden between two overflowing trash bins and a concrete bollard, sat a man hunched over beneath a thin, torn blanket. His beard was long, salt and pepper. His boots, scuffed and splitting at the seams, hinted at their once proud military shine. He clutched a cardboard sign in cracked, swollen hands. It read, Royal Army Veteran. Anything helps. His name was Thomas, though no one had asked in a long time. His gaze stayed fixed on the ground. The occasional passerby dropped a coin, but most didn't notice him, or pretended not to. Move along, mate, a sharp voice barked. A security guard in a reflective jacket loomed over him, kicking at the base of his cardboard sign. You're scaring the tourists. This isn't a shelter. Thomas didn't react right away. He blinked slowly, as if the world around him had dulled. I'm not hurting anyone, he mumbled. You're an eyesore, the guard snapped. Go beg somewhere else. I serve this country, Thomas said quietly. In the sand, in the blood. For nothing. But the guard wasn't listening anymore. He turned to signal another officer at the corner. Then, just as he reached for his radio, a sleek black Range Rover pulled up to the curb. Two security men stepped out, followed by a tall man in a navy coat, scarf tucked neatly around his neck. His presence commanded attention, but not because of the entourage or the car. It was the quiet authority in his stride. It was Prince William. The Duke of Cambridge was in the area for a scheduled visit to Stewart's Academy, a local school known for its progressive emotional support programs, especially for children facing big life changes. The visit was part of the ongoing Heads Together mental health initiative, a project close to William's heart. But the moment he stepped out of the vehicle, his attention wasn't on the school or the press waiting by the gates. It was on the small disturbance near the train station's edge. He saw the guard. He saw the man on the ground. He saw the sign. Without hesitation, William walked directly toward them. Is everything all right here? He asked, voice calm but firm. The security guard turned, startled, eyes going wide. Your Highness, I didn't realize. William held up a hand to silence the apology. His eyes were on Thomas, who was struggling to push himself upright. The prince knelt slightly to meet his gaze. What's your name? He asked. Thomas looked up slowly. For a moment, there was confusion. Was this some kind of dream? A trick of the rain? Thomas, he said at last. Thomas Riley. William noticed the dog tag still looped on a chain around his neck, the faint tattoo on his wrist, an emblem of the 2nd Battalion Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. You served? William asked gently. Afghanistan. 2007 to 2011. Then came home to this. The guard awkwardly stepped back. William remained still. Thomas coughed, clearly weak from the damp cold. His voice rasped. Doesn't matter now. Nobody sees me anymore. William looked down for a moment, then straightened. He reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a steaming paper cup of black coffee he'd only just been handed minutes earlier. Here, he said, handing it to Thomas. It's still hot. Thomas hesitated. You don't have to. But William was already sitting down on the bench beside him, ignoring the gathering drizzle and the cluster of stunned onlookers beginning to form at a respectful distance. I want to, he said. Thomas accepted the cup with trembling hands. The warmth was instant, but what struck him most was the prince's presence. No cameras, no script, just a man sitting beside him in the rain. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city moved around them, horns honking, footsteps rushing, but it all felt far away. William finally said, Thomas, if you served this country, then you were never invisible. Not to me. Thomas's lips parted, but no words came. His eyes filled slowly, like a dam giving way. I used to wear a uniform too, you know, William said, glancing at Thomas's worn boots. Felt like the world made sense in it. And then one day I wasn't wearing it anymore. The silence afterward, it's different. Heavy. Thomas chuckled hoarsely. You had a castle to return to. I had a pub and a bar fight. William didn't smile. He nodded instead, acknowledging the truth of it. Some wounds don't bleed, he said. But they still hurt. Thomas looked away, embarrassed by his tears. I don't need your pity. You're not getting pity, William said quietly. You're getting seen. Another pause. Thomas whispered, Why are you here, really? I was heading to a school, William answered. To talk to children about emotions. About the power of speaking up when something hurts. He looked around at the gray streets. Seems like the lesson started early today. Thomas laughed softly. Prince of bloody empathy. William smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. At that moment, a light breeze stirred the prince's coat. A royal aide cautiously approached, clearly torn between duty and discretion. Sir, we're expected at. In a moment, William said, not turning away. Then, reaching into his coat again, he pulled out a slim notepad and scribbled something quickly. I want to help you, Thomas. But not just for today. There are people, good people, who can do more than hand you coffee. Would you be open to that? Thomas stared at the note, unsure what was real anymore. Why? He finally asked. William folded the paper and tucked it into Thomas's coat pocket. Because if the country forgets its veterans, then it forgets its soul. Silence fell again. A different kind of silence. One filled with something Thomas hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. As Prince William stood to leave, he placed a hand gently on Thomas's shoulder. I'll see you again. All right. Thomas nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I'd like that. William gave one last glance, direct, respectful, before turning to his car. The moment passed. The rain lightened, and for the first time in years, Thomas felt warm. Not from the coffee, not from the coat, but from the kindness of a stranger, who just so happened to be a prince. The car door shut softly behind Prince William as they pulled away from the curb. But instead of heading directly to Stuart's Academy, he asked his driver to take a slight detour, a quiet side street nearby, away from flashing lenses. Inside the vehicle, he sat in silence for a moment. Raindrops slid down the glass in rivulets, mirroring the thoughts swimming behind his eyes. Dialogue. I saw a man fall today, he said, finally breaking the silence. Narration. The aide beside him looked up, confused. Dialogue. Sir? Narration. William leaned forward, speaking softly but firmly. Dialogue. Not long ago, we were in Essex. Catherine and I had just stepped out of the car at Stuart's Academy. We were greeted by Vice Lord Lieutenant Jonathan Douglas Hughes. You remember him? Narration. The aide nodded. Dialogue. Of course, sir. He served the crown for decades. Narration. William continued. Dialogue. He was in full ceremonial dress, sword, boots, the works. But just as he was stepping back to make way for us, he tripped over a bollard. He went down hard, backwards, in front of the cameras, the students, everyone. Narration. The aide winced. William's voice deepened. Dialogue. But I didn't think. I just moved. Ran straight to him and helped him up. He looked up at me and tried to laugh it off. Said, sorry about that. And I said, no, it's all right. Narration. He paused, then added. Dialogue. Because it was all right. You know why? Narration. The aide remained quiet. Dialogue. Because I didn't see a mistake, William said. I saw a man who has given his life to this country, who deserved to be lifted with dignity. Narration. He turned to face the aide fully. Dialogue. That's what today is about. Not press shots. Not speeches. It's about that moment, when someone stumbles, publicly or privately, and someone else reaches out a hand without hesitation. Narration. The car slowed to a stop near the entrance of Stuart's Academy. But William didn't get out. Instead, he pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long beat. Then, as if making a decision, he tapped in a number, one he hadn't called in years. It rang twice. A familiar voice answered. Dialogue. Captain Lewis speaking. Narration. Dan, William said with a slight smile. Dialogue. It's Will. Narration. A beat of surprise. Dialogue. Your Highness, it's been a while. It has, William replied. But I need a favor. I just met someone, a fellow vet named Thomas Riley. Royal Regiment. He's been on the streets, Dan. For years. Go on, Dan said, instantly serious. I need to get him off the pavement. Today. He needs somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. Someone to talk to. Proper mental health support. The whole works. Narration. There was no hesitation on the other end. Dialogue. I'll make the calls. There's a pilot program, actually. Small, discreet. Few beds. But it's designed exactly for this. Narration. William exhaled, grateful. Dialogue. Perfect. I'll bring him to you. Narration. After hanging up, he turned to the aide. Dialogue. Before we go inside, one more stop. Narration. 30 minutes later, William was back on that same bench by the station. The drizzle had turned into a light mist, and the crowds had thinned. Thomas was still there. He hadn't moved much, but something in his posture had shifted. Shoulders a bit less hunched, eyes a touch more alert. He looked up as William approached, surprised. "Dialogue. You came back," he said, almost in disbelief. "Narration. I said I would, didn't I?" William replied, sitting down beside him again. Thomas chuckled softly, then took a sip of the now empty coffee cup, pretending it still held warmth. William got straight to the point. "Dialogue. Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" Narration. Thomas shook his head. "Dialogue. I usually sleep under the overpass. Dry, mostly. Loud, though." Narration. William nodded. "Dialogue. You don't have to do that anymore. If you're willing, I've made a call. There's a place, clean, safe, run by former soldiers. Not a shelter. A proper program for people who served." Narration. Thomas blinked. "Dialogue. You did that for me?" "I did it because no one else has," William said. "And that's not right." Narration. Thomas looked away quickly, hiding his face. "Dialogue. You don't know me. Could be anyone." Narration. "I know enough," William replied. "I know you were the same flag I did. That's all I need to know." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then, his voice cracking. "Dialogue. You know, I used to be tough. Didn't cry for years. Not in war. Not when I lost my brother. Not even when I lost my home." Narration. William didn't speak. He waited. "Dialogue. But right now," Thomas whispered, eyes wet, "I feel like if I say one more word, I'll fall apart." Narration. And with that, he did. Tears broke free, silent and unstoppable. It wasn't the loud sobbing of despair. It was the quiet unraveling of years of being unseen, unheard, unheld. William didn't flinch. He didn't rush to comfort or fill the silence with platitudes. He simply sat there, steady and still. After a moment, he said softly, "Dialogue. You don't have to be strong right now. You've done your time." Narration. Thomas laughed through the tears. "Dialogue. You're not what I expected a prince to be." Narration. William smiled faintly. "Dialogue. I get that a lot." Narration. He stood, gently helping Thomas to his feet. "Dialogue. Come on. Let's get you somewhere warm." Narration. Thomas nodded, wiping his face on his sleeve. As they walked side by side toward the waiting car, no cameras followed. No headlines screamed. No red carpets unrolled. Just a prince and a soldier, both shaped by service, both bearing scars the world couldn't see. And in that quiet moment, beneath a gray London sky, a new chapter began. The next morning, the sky was clear for the first time in days. Soft golden light streamed through the windows of a modest but welcoming building on the outskirts of the city. A brass plaque beside the door read, "Haven House, Veteran Recovery and Renewal Center." Thomas stood at the entrance, hesitant. He clutched the paper Prince William had handed him, now creased from having been folded and unfolded again and again. The staff had been expecting him. "Dialogue. Welcome, Mr. Riley," a kind-faced woman in her 50s said. "We're honored to have you here. Why don't we get you settled in?" Narration. He followed her inside. Everything smelled clean, disinfectant, coffee, something floral. The walls were painted soft blue, calming, not institutional. The hallway was lined with framed photos of smiling men and women, former service members who'd come through the program. For the first time in years, Thomas wasn't being led into a shelter. He wasn't being handed a blanket and told to stay out of sight. He was being welcomed. That day, he underwent a full medical checkup. A dentist appointment was scheduled. A trauma-informed counselor gently introduced herself and invited him to talk when he was ready. No pressure, no clipboard, no judgment. A career advisor told him about several skill refresh programs. One in security services, one in logistics, and another in welding. "You don't have to decide now," she said. "Take your time." Lunch was hot, real. He sat at a table with other men, some younger, some older, all of whom bore invisible wounds like his. No one asked why he was there. They just passed the bread and talked about football. That afternoon, Thomas sat in the common lounge, still trying to take it all in. A large flat-screen TV was mounted to the wall, quietly playing the local news. He almost didn't notice it at first. Then he saw her, Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, walking down a school hallway, smiling gently at students in uniform. The camera cut to her husband, Prince William, sitting cross-legged in a classroom surrounded by 12-year-olds. A hush fell over the lounge as others turned to watch. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Duke and Duchess visit Essex School to discuss emotional resilience." The reporter's voice echoed softly. During a visit to Stewards Academy, part of their Heads Together mental health campaign, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge engaged with students about the emotional challenges young people face during major life transitions. The footage shifted to inside the classroom. A nervous girl was speaking about how she'd felt when her parents divorced. A boy spoke about bullying. Another student shared how hard it was to ask for help. William was listening deeply, intently. Then came a moment that silenced the entire lounge. The prince leaned forward and spoke to the class. "I think we need to end the old-fashioned idea that feeling down is something to be ashamed of. Talking about our emotions doesn't make us weak, it makes us real. Whether you're 12 or 60, whether you're starting school or starting over in life, what matters is knowing you're not alone." Thomas felt something shift in his chest. William continued, his voice steady and warm. "Sometimes just saying, 'I'm not okay,' is the bravest thing a person can do. We want young people to know that their mental health matters, but we also want everyone to know that veterans, parents, teachers, anyone who's ever struggled in silence." The screen flicked back to the news anchor summarizing the visit, but Thomas was no longer watching. He was staring at the floor, jaw clenched, heart pounding. A quiet voice beside him broke the moment. "You okay?" one of the other vets asked. Thomas nodded, swallowed hard. Then, for the first time in over a decade, he said something he'd forgotten how to say. "I think I want to talk to someone." He stood up and walked out of the lounge toward the counseling office. Steps slow but certain. Later that night, Thomas sat on his bed in a room of his own. A clean bed, warm light, a closet with space for clothes, and a small desk. On the table beside him was a small brochure from the center, and beside it, carefully laid out, was the only possession he'd managed to keep through the years, his old army dog tags. He picked them up and stared at them for a long while. There was no self-pity in his eyes anymore, no shame, just reflection and resolve. William's words echoed again in his mind. "Whether you're 12 or 60, what matters is knowing you're not alone." He pressed the tags to his chest. "I'm not," he whispered. "Not anymore." 6 months had passed since the rainy morning on the bench. The man who once sat beneath a torn blanket, holding a cardboard sign, now stood tall in front of a grand mirror, buttoning a crisp navy suit jacket. His hair was trimmed, his beard neatly groomed, his eyes, once heavy with sorrow, now held a quiet strength. Thomas Riley barely recognized the reflection staring back at him. A knock came at the door of his guest room in Kensington Palace's West Wing. A palace staffer peeked in, smiling. "They're ready for you, Mr. Riley." He took a breath, not the nervous kind, more a moment to center himself, to honor the journey. Then he stepped into the corridor, flanked by 2 veterans from the center who had become his closest friends. The 3 of them walked side by side into the candlelit reception hall, where over 100 guests, royals, dignitaries, and servicemen, were gathered for an evening honoring unsung heroes of the armed forces. Soft chamber music played in the background. Waiters passed hors d'oeuvres and champagne, but all eyes turned as Thomas took the stage. Behind him, a large banner read, "In service, in silence, in strength, a tribute to our forgotten heroes." He adjusted the microphone. For a heartbeat, the old fear crept in, the shame, the memory of park benches and empty bellies. But it passed, because he wasn't that man anymore. He spoke. "6 months ago, I slept on a bench outside a train station. I was cold, invisible, and convinced that my life had ended without anyone noticing. I wore the uniform of my country with pride for years, but when I returned home, I lost everything. My home, my family, my will. I wasn't just homeless, I was forgotten. And then someone saw me. The room was completely still. It wasn't a social worker. It wasn't a news crew. It was a man in a coat holding a coffee. A man who sat beside me in the rain, who didn't speak to me like a project or a problem, but like a fellow soldier. And that man just so happened to be Prince William." Murmurs rippled softly through the room. He didn't offer pity. He offered presence. He didn't throw money. He made a call. And because of that, I got a second chance, not because of royal influence, but because of human decency. Thomas's voice trembled slightly, but he stood tall. "I used to think your worth was tied to your rank, your medals, your paycheck, or your ability to hide your pain. But now I know the truth. Your worth lives in your story, in your heart, in your ability. To rise again, that's the only uniform that matters." He paused. So tonight, I stand before you not as a guest, not as a symbol, but as a survivor. A man who was lifted not by a prince's power, but by his kindness. Applause broke out slowly, rising into a standing ovation. At that moment, from behind the stage curtain, Prince William stepped into view. There was no fanfare, no royal announcement, just a warm smile as he walked over and placed a hand on Tomas's shoulder. They shared a quiet exchange, inaudible to the audience. William then stepped up to the microphone. You said you were invisible, Thomas. But you weren't. You were seen. And tonight, I hope the world sees what I saw that day. Not a man down on his luck, but a hero getting back up. He turned to the crowd. We often think of heroism as something loud and dramatic. But I've learned that the bravest acts are often quiet, like asking for help, like starting over. Flash bolts from the press area began to spark. But William didn't pose. He didn't perform. He just stood beside Thomas, hand still on his shoulder, anchoring the moment. The next morning, every major UK outlet carried the story. The Times ran the headline. Prince William helps homeless vet rebuild his life, quietly, compassionately. The Guardian wrote, From the pavement to the palace, a soldier's journey of dignity. But Thomas didn't read them. He was sitting in the community kitchen of Haven House, helping a new arrival fold his clean clothes. There was a quiet joy in his face, contentment without fanfare. Someone asked, What was it like standing next to the prince on that stage? Thomas smiled. He didn't save me with his crown. He saved me with his heart. That night, as the sun dipped low over the city skyline, Thomas stepped outside. The evening air, crisp and clean. He looked up at the darkening sky, stars just beginning to peek through. From homeless to honored. From voiceless to heard. And all because on a rainy day, someone chose to stop. To listen. To care. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't luck. It was kindness. And that made all the difference. The story you've just witnessed is not merely about a prince. It is about the quiet, enduring power of compassion. It is a reminder that even in a world of status, ceremony, and spectacle, what truly makes a difference is not a crown, but a kind heart willing to reach out. In a time when so many feel unseen, unheard, or forgotten, we hope this story brought a spark of hope into your day. Thomas's journey, from a bench on a rainy street to a stage inside Kensington Palace, is not just an inspiring tale. It is a testament to the truth that no life is too broken to rebuild, and no soul is too lost to be seen. If you believe, like we do, that every person, no matter their circumstances, deserves a second chance, we invite you to share this video. You never know who might need to see it. A single act of kindness, a simple message of hope, can ripple further than we imagine. And if this story moved you, consider joining us on this journey. Subscribe, Shoaib Buzzer channel, to experience more heartfelt tales where royalty meets humanity and where the smallest acts of goodness lead to the most powerful transformations. Because in the end, kindness is the noblest legacy we can carry. And sometimes the greatest royalty of all is the compassion we show to one another.